Good afternoon. My name is Tina Glandian. I'm one of the UN representatives of the Armenian International Women's Association, also known as IWA. I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar entitled No More Shame, Amot, Stopping the Tide of Domestic Violence in Armenia. For nearly 30 years, IWA has provided representation at the United Nations NGO Commission on the Status of Women, listening, learning, educating, and proactively seeking solutions to end the cycle of domestic violence. Today's event is brought to you as a collaboration between the Armenian Bar Association, IWA, IWA UN, and the Women's Support Center, all of which have the common goal of raising awareness about domestic violence in Armenia and addressing the limitations in Armenia's domestic violence law. The panel is being moderated by Maro Matosian, who is a champion in the plight for women's rights. She is the founder and executive director of Women's Support Center in Yerevan, assisting women and children victims of domestic violence, as well as advocating for their defense, working with government to change legislation. The Women's Support Center is one of the fundamental initiatives that IWA strongly supports. I'd now like to turn this over to Maro, who will introduce our panelists and start the discussion. And during the webinar, feel free to send any questions you may have in the chat box on the bottom of your screen. Thank you.
We will then be joined by Zarui Mejlumian, who is a lawyer, a criminal lawyer. And Zarui, please turn your microphone off. Yeah. So Zarui is a criminal lawyer, and she also works for the Women's Support Center. And then we have Rupen Stepanian from New York, a lawyer very much active in domestic violence cases that will join us from the New York Bar Association. I will start by presenting a PowerPoint presentation that was prepared by the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs that will point out from their perspective what they have done for combating domestic violence in Armenia. I just wanted to say that domestic violence is a really endemic in Armenia. And every year we have quite a number of deaths of femicides because of that. And I want to say that despite all the international political situation going in Armenia, around Armenia, throughout the world, I want to say that if we cannot have a democracy if there is no gender equality, if there is no gender equity. And for this reason, combating domestic violence and fighting for gender equality is so important in building a democracy, in building a healthy society. So let's start by looking at PowerPoint. Ruben, I think you're going to help me out in this. Okay, so hold on just a second. So domestic violence in the Republic of Armenia. Okay, we can go to the next. So domestic violence is a grave violation of a basic human right affecting particularly women and children, but also men and the elderly people. And this is very true because less men and elderly people come out to mention that they have been victims of domestic violence simply because it's a stigma, it's a shame for the men. And elderly people are very much dependent on their offsprings for care and support. However, the vast majority are women victims of domestic violence. Globally, 1 in 3 women and girls experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. Every 5th woman in Armenia is constantly subjected to domestic violence. Now, this is very much the presentation of the ministry, as I mentioned, but the civil society in Armenia have done research saying that, again, 1 in 3 women actually are subjected to domestic violence. Next. So Armenia has ratified almost all international legal acts related to human rights, and as a member of the UN and the Council of Europe, and as a state tending toward European integration, has undertaken certain obligation to harmonize national legislation with the provisions of those instruments. In December 2017, Armenia adopted the law on prevention of violence within the family, protection of victims of violence within the family, and restoration of peace in the family, also known as the domestic violence law. After the approval of the domestic violence law, several government decisions were made to ensure the appropriate support and protection defined by the law. The measures taken by the government is since 2020, domestic violence centers were launched in all regions of the country, which are co-funded by the state budget of the Republic of Armenia. Now, this is very important because this is an important step the government has taken that was not there previously. The support centers provide services to beneficiaries, such as social, psychological, and legal assistance, legal aid, hotline services, and protection measures stipulated by the law. They make a decision to transfer victims of violence within the family and persons under their care to the shelter upon their consent, and in cases and following the procedures specified in the law. Now, I have to say that there are only 2 domestic violence shelters in Armenia, which the Women's Support Center is running and the Iowa is supporting. And these domestic shelters now, they're also subsidized a little bit by the government, which is also another good initiative. So assist the victims of violence within the family in finding job and receive social assistance from the state or relevant organizations. In 2020, around 1,068 people received assistance from the support centers, and in 2021, Rupen, next slide. I think I'm missing something. I cannot see. I cannot see the bottom of the slide.
Around 1,516 people received assistance from the support center.
Okay. So with the co-funds provided by the state budget, there have been 2 shelters for victims of domestic violence, as we mentioned. Victims of violence within the family and persons under their care may be accommodated at the shelter upon their request if there is a reasonable belief that the violence may repeat or continue. Shelter shall freely provide to beneficiaries safe living space, psychological, legal, and social assistance, drawing, if needed, on the relevant specialists, food and clothing, as well as space with appropriate furniture and supplies for lessons to children. Arrange referral of beneficiaries to healthcare facilities for medical treatment and assistance if needed, and with the consent of beneficiaries. I would like you to read the bottom because I cannot see it.
In 2020, 135 people benefited from this shelter service, 53 women and 82 children. In 2021, 158 people benefited from the shelter service, 99 children and 59 women.
So also there is a hotline, the 114 hotline is the ministry's hotline. It deals with the numerous of issues. It's not a specialized domestic violence hotline, but it deals with assistance for people in need. And all support centers are provided with the hotline number, pandemic and recovery efforts. And then in order to support the victims of domestic violence, a lump sum financial assistance program is being provided to the victim of domestic violence up to 150,000 drams, which is about $300. And this again comes from the state budget. And usually this is given to the women who are in dire need because, as you know, they are financially or economically dependent on the abuser. And when they want to start a new life, they need some seed money. In 2021, a lump sum was provided to 77 individuals, and are these domestic violence support centers who apply to the ministry for their beneficiaries who are in need of this seed money financial support. I think, and then the ministry has an awareness raising program. If we go to the next slide. Ongoing training is provided to support center and shelter staff in cooperation with the national, and non-governmental organizations in the field. Here I might say that actually the trainings are done by the Council of Europe primarily, and other international organizations. The ministry is not, the ministry itself, the government does not do trainings. And the awareness campaigns also were done in collaboration with the Council of Europe. And you see here on the right, a poster that these were placed at the bus stops throughout Yerevan. New round of trainings were provided to frontline workers, such as helpline workers, 114 and 911, social workers and psychologists, and the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. 3 micro projects are being implemented in 3 marses in 3 provinces to prevent domestic violence and violence against women, as well as equality and women's empowerment at the grassroots level. The Safe You is a multifunctional mobile application developed in Armenia by UNICEF, actually, in collaboration with domestic violence support centers. I don't see the bottom. But it's an app.
Right.
It's a cell phone app. Yeah. So you see that the government has taken some steps in supporting, and they're working now to amend the legislation to make it better, and the criminal law. But a big bulk of the activities is taken by the international organizations and with the local NGOs that work in this field. And now I will give the, so to speak, the microphone to Karine, who will do her presentation.
Thank you, Mauro. Hello, everyone. Thank you for organizing this important meeting. I'm Garnet Aftian from Armenia. I represent Women's Rights House organization, which was founded in 2017 in the Shirak region, which is the 2nd region of Armenia. And now about the topic, according to the research, every 3rd person is subjected to violence, as Mauro also already mentioned. And only during 2021, we have 101 domestic violence cases, and in 2022, we had 54 domestic violence cases in the 1st quarter, including cases of torture, etc. But I'm talking about only one organization that have these numbers, but also we have other organizations in the all different regions and police departments that have different numbers as well. But besides, during COVID-19 and the post-war situation, the cases of domestic violence drastically increased, unfortunately. And although the government tries to prevent the issues, for instance, it's been 3 years that the government subsidizes the local organization to tackle domestic violence cases in all regions, but still it is not enough to prevent in all level, I mean. And besides, despite the fact that the relevant governmental bodies and police officers who are dealing with the domestic violence cases are getting trained, but still, again, it is not enough because there is lack of gender sensitivity, lack of trust towards police officers because of that, lack of professional competence. And I surely believe that the protective mechanisms should be developed together with civil society and governmental bodies. And about the law that Mauro already mentioned, domestic violence prevention law adopted in 2017, but has many legislative gaps. For instance, perpetrators impunity and other, lots of provisions that should be changed. And unfortunately, in Armenia, DV crime is not criminalized yet. And in this sphere, lots of organizations, I really do appreciate the civil society's efforts they put in. And I really believe that without these efforts that we try to put, it wouldn't be even realistic to deal with all these cases and prevent domestic violence. And now a bit, I would like to introduce about our organizations and our work that we do in the Shirak region. And in 2022, our organization has been chosen as a support center for domestic violence cases in the Shirak region, again by the Ministry of Social and Labor Affairs. And since 2017, we provide different services such as legal, social, and psychological consultation free of charge, of course, and to women and girls who are facing domestic or sexual violence or even labor rights violations. And together with other coalition members and governmental bodies, we try to advocate for women's rights. And also, not only we are providing these essential services, but also we try to provide comprehensive services and collaborate with key stakeholders. And we also, since 2021, if I'm not mistaken, we already try to provide shelter for women, but here we collaborate with the MAROs, with the Women's Support Center, and we try to give this opportunity to those women and girls and children who have nowhere to go and face domestic violence. Our organization has three clear directions, which are, first one is protection and prevention of domestic or sexual violence against women and girls, and second one is capacity building in economic empowerment. And here we always emphasize women's financial independence and women's entry into the labor market and entrepreneurship and the educational system, as well as enabling women to acquire new professions and raising awareness on labor rights and other in all spheres. And the third direction is to promote women's participation in political decision-making processes, especially at local level. And our organization has reached thousands of women and shown great impact in just a few short years and met tremendous needs for services. And we have non-discriminative and non-judgmental approaches, especially when we are speaking about very sensitive topic and issues such as violence. In the last year alone, 148 of our beneficiaries, including domestic violence survivors, took part in a variety of economic empowerment programs to build their skills, jumpstart their careers, and start their own small businesses from rural and urban areas. In order them to be empowered and to encouraged to go forward, and why not one day maybe nominate themselves as a community leaders. And we are proud to report about our results as well, that 92 women and girls entered new professions, and now 71 are already financially independent and earning wages and somehow financially independent. And if you are financially independent, you can make your own decisions and you can take care of you and your kids and everyone, your family members as well. And also, we provided financial support to 13 women to start their small startups. For instance, now we have vegan chocolate products, mushroom products, Kimri gatas products, it's sweets, and honey products, and many other like eco-bags products. And we're really proud of this because due to this economic empowerment, lots of women gained new professions, new professional equipment, started their small startups, and really become more empowered and economically stable situation. And to sum up my speech, I would like to spread the message to women that don't be afraid and speak up. Now I just want to let you know that you are not alone. In Armenia, in different regions, there are lots of support centers that will stand by women's side. And one more message and last message to society: just never be silent and never judge others, just try to support them. Thank you, Marjan.
Karina, it's wonderful. You're doing a great job. To our listeners, maybe saying that 71 women received are financially independent, maybe it's not such a big number. However, in the economic situation, given the economic situation of Armenia, believe me, that's a great achievement. And also to understand that women in Armenia, the victims of domestic violence, to empower them, in other words, to raise their self-esteem, their self-confidence that was so destroyed by the abuser, and to bring them to a position where they can start their own business and reintegrate in society. It's a big challenge for any support center, and Garine's organization is doing a phenomenal job in a region that is very, very conservative, I have to say.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Garine. And let's hear now from Zarui.
Շնորհակալություն
Zarui, պիտի խնդրեմ, որ մեկ երկու նախադասություն ասես, հետո գանքիս, որ թարգմանությունը, Zarui's presentation will be translated from Armenian into English.
Շնորհակալություն բոլորին, շնորհակալություն այս կարևոր թեման առանձնացնելու համար եւ եւս մեկ անգամ բարձրաձայնելու համար.
Thank you to all. Thank you for placing such a high importance on this very important topic and raising it up. Thank you very much.
Մարոն նոր իր խոսքում ասաց, որ ֆանտաստիկ աշխատանք է կատարում Կարինե's կազմակերպությունը այս սպերայում, բայց ես
Maro just
կասեմ,
said
որ
that Garine's organization is doing a phenomenal job in this sphere, but I would also like to mention that
որ բոլոր կազմակերպությունները, ովքեր զբաղվում են կանանց ընտանեկան բռնությամբ գործերով, իսկապես անում են շատ լուրջ կարևոր աշխատանք.
that all the organizations that are working for this cause, for women, for DV, are doing an amazing job. Այդ թվում որը?
Այդ թվում նաև այն կազմակերպությունը, որը ես ներկայացնում եմ այժմ, կանանց աջակցման կենտրոնը.
Including the organization I am presenting today, the Women's Resource Center.
Support Center.
Support Center.
Yeah. Thank you. Կանանց աջակցման կենտրոնում ես 2 տարի աշխատում եմ եւ ներկայացնում եմ քրեական գործերը.
I'm working at the center for 2 years and I'm in charge of the criminal cases.
Ինչ եմ նկատել, այս 2 տարվա ընթացքում ուզում եմ կիսել ուղղակի իմ փորձը, ինչ որ տեսել եմ որպես փաստաբան դատարաններում պրակտիկ աշխատանքի ընթացքում.
What have I noticed during the last 2 years is what I would like to share as an advocate in the courts.
Հիմնականում այն խնդիրն է մեզ մոտ, որ քրեական օրենսգրքով ընտանեկան բռնությունը քրեական հանցանք չէ.
The main issue is that DV is not criminalized according to the criminal court. This is the case.
Այդպես էր, այո, նախկինում, այդպես է նաև այն քրեական օրենսգրքով, որը ուժի մեջ է մտնելու բառացիորեն 1 ամիս անց.
It was the case in the past, and it is the case according to the criminal code that will enter into force in only a month.
Հենց սա էլ խնդիրների խնդիրն է, որ մենք միշտ բարձրաձայնում ենք, միշտ առաջարկում ենք եւ ընտանեկան բռնության գործերով զբաղվող կազմակերպությունները թերևս 2010 թվականից եւ ավելի շուտ բարձրաձայնել են, որ չքրեականացնելը ընտանեկան բռնության բերում է շատ օրենսդրական եւ պրակտիկ խնդիրների.
This is the case of the case, like the biggest problem that we have. All the organizations working with DV, working with violence, all starting from 2010, they have been mentioning over and over again, if DV or any violence is not criminalized, it brings to many practical issues and consequences.
Խնդիրներից մեկն էլ այն է, որ շատ են լինում հաշտության դեպքերը, հա, եւ դրանք լինում են կեղծ հաշտություններ։ Շատ անգամ կանանց վրա կարողանում են ազդել երեխաներով, այ դու չես տեսնի վաղը երեխաներիդ եւ այլն, եւ կանայք բողոքները հետ են վերցնում։
Resolution ne հաշտությունը։
Հաշտությունը։
There are many cases that they come to a resolution, they solve the conflict. And very often women remove their complaints, retrieve their complaints from the courts. They use children as a leverage to say you will not see your children, to put pressure on the women. Thus, women retrieve their complaints.
Մեզանում շատ եղավ ուղղակի առաջարկություններ, որ փոխեք, հա, մասնավոր մեղադրանքը դարձնեն հանրային մեղադրանք, այսինքն կախված չլինի անձի բողոքից, այսինքն ինչպես է կատարվում մեզ մոտ ոչ մեծ ծանրության գործերը, երբ անձը բողոքում է, գործը հարուցվում, երբ անձը չի բողոքում, գործը չի։ Ահա։
What was proposed was, instead of having to not put a difference between private and public offenses. And what was the case previously? When a person applied to, regardless of the fact whether it was a grave issue or a minor issue,
գործը հարուցվում է, երբ անձը բողոքում է, եւ երբ անձը չի բողոքում, գործը փակվում է.
Whenever this is the case, the proceeding only can be initiated if there is a complaint by the person. If the person does not have a complaint, then nobody can raise the complaint.
Այսինքն այստեղ ազդում են կանանց վրա շանտաժի միջոցով եւ այլն եւ կինը հետ է վերցնում բողոքը, հաճախ մնում են անպատիժ տղամարդիկ
And as a result, very often blackmail is used as a tool, and women very often retrieve their complaint. And as a result, we have impunity of the perpetrators. Men just do not reap the consequences because women are retrieving their complaints.
Այս խնդիրը լուծելու համար կանանց աջակցման կենտրոնը երկար ժամանակ առաջարկում էր, որպեսզի դատախազությունը ունենա բացառիկ լիազորություն.
In order to solve this problem, the Women's Support Center for a very long time was suggesting for the prosecutor's office to have exclusive rights.
Որ երբ չկա կնոջ բողոքը, բայց ստուգում ենք եւ տեսնում ենք, որ այստեղ կա կեղծ հաշտություն եւ կա շանտաժի էլեմենտ եւ կինը անօգնական վիճակում է եղել, դատախազությունը էլ չի նայում, բողոք կա չկա, ինքը հարուցում է գործը.
The suggestion was the following: the prosecutor's office visits the house and notices that there are elements of violence, and regardless of the fact whether the woman has a complaint or not, the prosecutor's office can file a case.
Եվ սա օգնեց բավականին. Այս փոփոխությունը եղավ մի քանի տարի առաջ, 3 տարի առաջ կարծես, եւ սա մի քիչ օգնեց. Օրինակ իմ պրակտիկայում կան այդպիսի դեպքեր, երբ դատախազությունն է հարուցել.
Եվ ընդունվել է, այդ օրենքը ընդունվել է.
Այո, եւ մենք հաղթանակ ենք ունեցել.
This was adopted and amended in the code 3 years ago, and big changes have occurred ever since, where the prosecutor's office has entered the home and has noticed this and has filed cases. This was a very good achievement. And there's one terminology I would like to clarify, please. There's a term the speaker is using called a fake peace. So they pretend that there is no conflict. Where they pretend that there is no conflict. Could anybody come up with the terminology for that?
False հաշտություն ուղղակի reconciliation.
Yes.
It
Is
may
it
be
false
false reconciliation.
Maybe false reconciliation. Yes.
Okay. So claiming, where very often women retrieve their claim cases saying because of false reconciliation. Thank you.
Սա ես համարում եմ մեծ հաղթանակ, որովհետև ներկայիս քրեական դատավարության օրենսգրքում եւս այս դրույթը պահպանվել է եւ հուլիսի 1-ից ուժի մեջ է մտնելու ավելի հստակ կարգավորմամբ.
I believe this is a great victory because the criminal code has been amended in the past and the same article remains in the criminal code, and starting from July 1st it will continue to remain in force. A wonderful victory.
Ես մեկ բացի մասին խոսեցի, կարևորագույն, այն որ քրեականացված չէ ընտանեկան բռնությունը եւ մեկ հաղթանակի մասին, որ կարողացել ենք ունենալ եւ միշտ այդպես է, հա, պայքարի ճանապարհին այդպես է.
I mentioned one gap that we have had, and that is the fact that DV is not criminalized. At the same time, I mentioned of a victory. This is life. When you're on the path of struggle, you always have pluses and minuses.
Պետական կառույցների հետ աշխատանքը միշտ բավականին բարդ է, բայց պետք է չի ասի թե ընկերներ դառնալ, բայց կարողանալ կառուցողական տրամադրել, որպեսզի իրենք եւս գնան ընթառաջ եւ առողջ հատիկ տեսնելով փոփոխություններ կատարեն.
Working with state bodies is never easy. However, I'm not proposing being friends. However, I do propose regularly looking for constructive solutions and cooperating hand in hand towards the positive changes regarding the goals that we have set.
Եվ ես կարող եմ ասել, որ ստացվում է, հա, որոշ դիվանագիտական ճանապարհով, ինչ որ ձևով կառուցողական դնել խնդիրները, առաջարկություններ անել, գնալ հանդիպումների, համոզել, որ մեր ասածների մեջ կան առողջ հատիկներ եւ գոնե 10-ից եթե 5-ն էլ ընդունվում է, արդեն հաղթանակ է.
And I can surely say that we have succeeded in certain areas, may it be via the diplomatic path. We have been able to achieve a constructive dialogue. When we set our goals, we come up with proposals, we have meetings, we try to convince them to see our perspective. If not all, but probably 5 out of 10 have been successful.
Տեսեք, այ ասում եմ քրեականացված չի, չէ, ընտանեկան բռնությունը, բա ինչ հոդվածներով են հարուցվում այս գործերը քրեական օրենսգրքի։ Դուք կհարցնեք իհարկե դա ինձ։
I said that DV is not criminalized, so you can raise a question. So according to what articles and provisions are these crimes set forth?
Ուրեմն դրանք ներկայիս քրեական օրենսգրքով, իհարկե հուլիսի 1-ից այլ օրենսգիրք է ուժի մեջ մտնելու, ծեծի հոդվածն են, ամենաշատ հերթապահ հոդվածն է, հա, ինչ գործ կա, հարուցվում է ծեծի հանցակազմով, կամ միջին մարմնական վնասվածք, կամ ծանր մարմնական վնասվածք, սրանք այն հերթապահ հոդվածներն են, որոնք միշտ առկա են այս գործերով։
According to the current criminal code, the most often occurring article is beating or physical abuse. May it be severe, may it be average, may it be grave, or may it be minor. Beating is or physical abuse.
Օրինակ, տեսեք, հետապնդումը մենք որպես այդպիսին չունենք քրեականացված, այնպես ինչպես չունենք քրեականացված ընտանեկան բռնությունը, բայց սա շատ կարևոր հոդված է, որ մենք հիմա պայքարում ենք, որ մտնի։
Harassment is not criminalized as well.
I'm sorry, Niri. It's about stalking.
Stalking, thank you.
Yes.
Հետամտում են
Yes.
ասում։ Ինձ ասել են հետամտում։
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the same thing. stalking.
Հետապնդում, հետամտումը ուրիշ է։
Okay, if Maru says it's stalking, or go with stalking.
Stalking, yes, stalking.
So harassment or stalking?
Stalking.
Stalking.
Okay, yeah. So stalking is not criminalized, just like DV is not criminalized.
Բայց սա շատ կարևոր է։
Զարուի ամփոփե արդեն։
Ամփոփեմ արդեն, հա։
Այո։
Շատ բարի, շատ բարի, կարող եմ ամփոփել ասելով, որ մեր դատարաններում իհարկե ես ականատես եմ եղել մեղմ պատիժների, հիմնականում ստանում են մեղմ պատիժներ բռնարարները եւ դա ընդհանրապես տուգանք կարող է լինել։ Լավագույն դեպքում տուգանքը վճարում են եւ ազատեն։
I have noticed that very often the perpetrators, the consequences they are facing very often are very mild punishments. Even just with a financial payment, they get away.
Սա իհարկե խնդիր է եւ կանխարգելման տեսանկյունից չի կարող ունենալ լուրջ դեր։
And of course, this is a very serious issue. And from the perspective of prevention, it does not play an important role.
Երկրորդ խնդիրը պրոցեսուալ շատ երկար է տևում եւ տուժողը կրկնակի վիկտիմիզացիայի է ենթարկվում, անընդհատ կանչում են իրեն բացատրություն տուր, ցուցմունք տուր, չգիտեմ, առերեսում
And the second issue is that the procedure is so long that the victim undergoes becoming a secondary victim. They all the time call to the police department, please write the statement, participate in this interview, please write this, please write that, the documentation.
Սրանք են հիմնական խնդիրները եւ նաեւ վաղեմության ժամկետի մասին վերջում ասեմ, որ այնքան է ձգվում process-ը հաճախ իրավունքի չարաշահման հետևանքով, հա, բռնարարի փաստաբանի կողմից օրինակ, հա, երկարացվում է process-ը այնքան, մինչեւ որ անցնում են վաղեմության ժամկետները եւ անձը պատասխանատվության չի ենթարկվում։
Expiration teoriş termin ka. Expiration termina.
Չեմ հիշում։
And the other issue that we face is regarding expiration. So the situation is the following: there are very often abuse of rights, and the perpetrator's advocate can make the case prolonged to such a long term that already the expiration date is nothing can be done about it. There's an expiration date.
Այսպեսի երկու գործ ունեմ, որ այսպես ձգեցին եւ ծեծի հոդվածով օրինակ 2 տարի ավաղեմությունը եւ 2 տարին արդեն լրանալու վրա կիրառվում է վաղեմություն եւ անձը ազատվում պատասխանատվությունից.
It's the statute of limitations.
Yes. The statute of limitations for beating and physical abuse is 2 years. And I have 2 such cases that the advocates of the perpetrators prolonged the case to so long that nothing could be done anymore.
Thank you, Zara. I think lava ամփոփեցիր ամեն ինչը։ Շնորհակալություն. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not difficult. It's difficult with the translation. I was wondering if Garina has anything to add to what Zara said.
No, I just wanted to say that yes, there is actually our victims are getting twice victimized, unfortunately, during these whole procedures. And me as a lawyer, always fighting with this, also with the police officers and other governmental bodies, and it is hard, twice as hard for them and for us. But yeah, Zara Jan, thank you for covering all gaps.
Okay, and now we should proceed to Ruben with his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Maro and Zara. That was wonderful presentation. It really gave much light to the issues that women experience in Armenia. So I just want to first introduce myself. I'm a divorce and family law attorney here in New York. I was an administrative law judge for New York City Administrative Court. And I am the co-chair of Armenian Bar's Domestic Violence Committee. I have been working with Maro and Zara for a while on this issue, as they are aware. The Armenian Bar has taken a strong stance against domestic violence, and we want to help both the Armenian women in the Armenian diaspora as well as women in Armenia. Domestic violence is a virus. And it is not unique to any jurisdiction, whether it be New York, California, or even Armenia. Domestic violence exists in all cultures, and some cultures have, taken a good stance on it, others not so much. I am proud to say, however, that Armenia is one of those countries that has taken a stance, although, changes are required, but at least we have taken a stance. At least there is some kind of a statute out there, and I'm very proud of my people out in Armenia to do this, but we do need changes. Without the required changes, domestic violence is going to affect democracy, like Maru said in the beginning, and it will absolutely affect the jurisdictions or the nation's economy itself. Imagine if half of your population is under constant threat of violence or mockery, or they will not be able to operate the way that a country needs their citizens to operate, to grow, to expand, to be independent. So this is why domestic violence is such a key issue for us Armenians. We have found ourselves, 30 plus years as an independent country. However, we do need to become a strong independent country. Strong means economically strong, powerful. And if half of our population is unable to live without fear of some kind of a violence, then that cannot happen. And that is why I personally am passionate about this cause. I want Armenia to be strong and powerful, and to be a role model for all nations throughout the world. Okay, so as I said before, I have litigated many domestic violence cases here in New York, and in the United States, each jurisdiction has its own domestic violence laws. And the reason for that is that each jurisdiction and the people within that specific locality or jurisdiction have their own issues they have to grapple with. So for instance, laws in New York are going to be different than, laws out in Boston or in California. And so whenever we talk about coming up with laws and statutes to remedy a certain situation, we need to be mindful that the remedy has to be what the population within that locality needs. Here in New York, we do not have any such thing as, if a domestic violence report is called into the police, for the police to write warnings to the perpetrator. And the reason why that's done here is because when a perpetrator is given only a warning and nothing else, the perpetrator most likely will continue the violence and actually may become more malicious because, oh, why would you call the police on me? So now you deserve for me to become more malicious. That's one.
Ruben, let me interrupt you to clarify here that the domestic violence law in Armenia has that point there. When the policeman gives a warning, and it's something that we fight very virulently against this procedure, as Ruben mentioned, the reason for it. And now they came to the conclusion that it's really not a good idea, but we have to still convince other people to change the law.
Right. And also regarding warnings, if you're not specifically trained to identify what domestic violence looks like, you're not going to, or an officer, a police officer will not properly be able to identify if what they stepped into is a domestic incident. And that's because most of the time the perpetrator to an average person is going to be a very charming and very polite person to deal with. And you know, and on the other hand, the abused person, you know, they will drive, the perpetrator will drive the abused person nuts. So, and that's the, so because of that, a lot of times police aren't going to be able to identify without the right training. And I have a colleague here in New York who is an assistant district attorney, and who has given us a lot of materials on how well the police are trained here. And number three, then the last point that I'd like to raise is that New York laws do not have anything about conciliation. And that's really because once Domestic Violence Act has taken place, the balance of power is so, I don't know the term, there is no balance of power. The woman has no power at that point. Therefore, to convince them to go and reconcile, it would be basically just pushing them back right into that same situation. And that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rupert. Very good, important points, and the differences between some procedures or legislation in United States, in New York, and in Armenia. And I have to say that from my readings, it took about 40 years in the United States to better the legislation and the procedures and mechanisms and training and all that. Last time when I was in Boston, in Cambridge, actually, they noticed they had such a system into place, and multi-sectoral system that acts from the mayor's office to police to social services and all that, that they didn't have a death in the Cambridge area, at least, for years and years due to domestic violence. So this is a great achievement on their part. Yes, I want to address a question that came out on the chat from Silva, and she's mentioning that the cause of domestic violence is patriarchy, is toxic masculinity, and it's very true, as Ruben mentioned, that this gender inequality is really the cause of domestic violence, and fighting those things is changing the gender stereotypes in society and educating young people and their parents to upbring the children in a more equitable environment. But this takes time. To change a mindset, it takes a lot of time. Attitudes towards women take a lot of time, but we have started, and I have to say that for 10 years with Karin as an activist also, we fought to bring this law about, the domestic violence law, which is not perfect, but it will get better. And Armenia has seen a lot of improvement in a very short period of time for combating domestic violence. We're not there yet, but steps are being taken, as mentioned. And when Zarui pointed out to the problems, the lack of accountability of the perpetrator is perhaps our biggest issue. And given recently training to policemen, they all talked about the same thing. We have to offer more severe punishment to perpetrators rather than a fine, which is for 10 years of abuse, which is equivalent to a traffic fine. And this is something very important. If our listeners have questions, I think we can open the mics, and if they can identify themselves, I'll be very happy.
Perfect. I see one hand raised.
Yes, please turn on your mic.
Emma, your microphone is off, is on mute.
Well, meantime, we have a comment from Vika Dernikogosyan about the number of cases of domestic violence. Throughout the world is 1 in 3, and Armenia is no exception on that. The ministry says 1 in 5. However, civil society, the way they have done research and studies and surveys, they also notice that it's 1 in 3 in Armenia as well. Somebody has raised their hand, but is not. Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me? This is Emma,
Yes.
calling in from New York. Thank you so much. I'm proud to be a member of the Armenian Bar Association and also IWA and IWA UN. The question I have is very specific to villages, because most of the deaths, when we did a lot of the research, the numbers are coming, death cases are coming mainly from villages. And there is a lot of violence in the family, not only by men, but also women. So the question is the training, not only what is being done in villages. Gyumri to me is a city, so it's great that we mentioned Gyumri, but villages, what is going to be specifically done to change that culture mentality in villages? That's my question. Thank you.
Karina, you want to answer that? We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now? Yeah,
Mhm.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, actually, as I said, we provide some services, but not only we provide these services, but also in villages, in rural and urban areas, we always go and raise awareness. I mean, do some non-formal educations and different meetings, different like non-formal public events, and try to work with them and try to reach not only women who live in cities, but also in the villages. And yes, I really, I also know that in the villages, maybe the domestic violence cases is twice as higher, but they are afraid of and or ashamed of speak up about this. And also they even do not associate the domestic violence as a domestic violence, because the majority of women when I met, the majority knows that violence is only physical abuse, but yeah, they don't know about psychological, social, economical, and other type of violence. So we try to raise awareness and try to meet with them in every year a few times. So
I want to say that domestic violence support centers that are in the provinces, they extend their services and they extend their activities outside of the center of the region, the town or the city, and they're trying to raise awareness. However, the situation in the village is a bit different, because there everybody knows each other, they are related to each other, and it's very, very difficult to escape from that situation. Unless the woman calls the police and then she's asked to be taken to the shelter, it's difficult for the woman to come out. When organizations like Garine go out into the villages and raise awareness, at least they know that there is a hotline for them to call and they can receive services.
yeah, one more comment from Armen. He wrote, actually, I do agree, because there are lots of women that are applying to us, but they don't get legal consultation, but they want only to receive psychological consultation, and only during the consultation sessions, during the therapies, they try to speak up and share their experience. Yeah, so.
There was another question here in the chat from Tamar Shamlian from Montreal, Canada, that is asking how can she help women victims for as a possible sponsor for financial independence. Yes, please write to me or to Karine. We can forward, depending on what region you want to help, we can put you in contact with a support center, and you can wire money there for independent, financial independent for victim of domestic violence.
Okay, I asked to be unmuted. So, hi, thank you again so much. I cannot stop thanking you for doing this work, Maro, Karine. And my question is, Karine mentioned violation or labor rights. Any numbers, any figures? I'm not talking even about emotional or psychological violence, but if you could share some labor rights figures, that will be very helpful in the work that we are doing. Thank you.
I can answer.
Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Also, we provide legal and social consultation to women and girls who face abuse of labor rights violations or harassment or any type of abuse of the basic rights. And we also help them to write competitive CVs and to find the jobs. And besides, we also organize, again, non-formal trainings in whole Chirac region, different communities to raise awareness on their labor rights. And also we conducted one research in the Chirac region, and it's about women's rights, labor rights violations during especially COVID-19, and I can share later the whole research, and you can see the numbers and the answers that we received.
So another question, it's related to engaging men to understand what DV is and that is not acceptable and potentially change their behavior. I have to say that there are some initiatives happening in Armenia. There are in Gyumri, I believe in Vanadzor and Ichevan, in Davush region, there are family corners, so to speak. These are little gathering of young fathers to engage them into more equal sharing of responsibility, family responsibilities. There are various NGOs, they do training with the youth in presenting them what is a healthy versus abusive relationship. And this is done by various organizations, but it's really a drop in the ocean. If you ask me, we don't have national campaigns run by the state to address these issues, and this is something that is so much needed. Each of us, each women organization, domestic violence support center, is speaking out in the media, on TV, giving interviews. We try to do 300 things at once to raise awareness, but this is something that in a very patriarchal society is very difficult to engage men. And that's why we think that through legislation that makes the men accountable, that's the only way to force men to understand that this is a crime. It's not something acceptable. It's not something tolerable by anyone, and it's really a crime. So unless they don't get that message in society, I think very little can be said that we can achieve. I think we're getting close to the end of our program, but if there are any more questions or comments, please raise your hands or write in the chat. I want to also mention, here, hold on just a second, I think. Yes, there is another issue here that that is this passed on generationally as a trauma. I'm not an expert in this. There is some talk nowadays that genocide is transferred through DNA, something. I'm not an expert. Only thing I can say is that domestic abuse, it's a learned experience. And boys and girls, children that witness this in their parents, the vast majority of the boys become abusers, and the girls enter into such type of relationships when they marry. And this is something, we call it a transgenerational, and that is why it's so important to combat domestic violence. So this is not passed on to the young generations. And I want to say also that domestic violence, one of the biggest problems actually that we face is the effect it has on children. And unfortunately, Armenia does not have a strong child protection system. And children are very much the victims of domestic violence. And we know the effects of trauma on children, the scars that they leave for the rest of their lives, the fact that they do not, they're not good in school, in the school performance, they can become antisocial because of it. So there are many, many issues that children are affected from such a experience. I don't see any more questions. Victoria is saying that epigenetically trauma gets passed. She's the expert, and epigenetically I have to look it up.
Yeah, if you want, I can explain what epigenetically is very shortly. It's when there are some mechanisms over our genes that, depending on our lifestyle, it changes our genes responses, expressions. So it is proven last 10, 15 years of epigenetic development. Please check it. Marajan, can I take just ask one short question?
Sure.
What can we do, how we can help in criminalizing DV, and not only physical abuse, but also physiological, economic, and emotional?
Well, first of all, I have to say that, and Zarwi mentioned briefly that a new criminal code is has been accepted and will start to function as of July. Even though domestic violence is not mentioned in that code, abuse, physical, psychological, sexual, and economic abuse from a relative, past or present, husband, also, or an intimate partner, it's now criminalized. So we still have to wait to see how this is going to come into practice and how it is going to be implemented. I have to say that besides policemen, we also need a lot of judges and prosecutors to be trained properly, because we have judges that are not really up to par. They're very biased. So we have to see how that will work. But this is a great step forward, so that it's happening.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, everyone. I think we had a very good, interesting discussion. I want to thank again the New York Bar and Rupen especially, and Anaidu Gurlayan, who I hope she's listening to us, because they've been very much interested in this topic and offering great interest and input. They're trying to assist us in many ways. And it's very difficult from afar because things are happening very quickly in Armenia. Many changes in legislation, in procedure, things are happening very fast. And I know that everybody's busy in New York, so it's very hard for you to keep up with all the changes. Another question was raised here, if the law also is addressing mother-in-laws. Yes, any relative of the abuse, and we do have mother-in-laws, unfortunately, who are abusive. Thank you, everyone. This was a great panel. This was a great discussion, and it's for a very difficult and very sad subject matter. But I hope that when you come to Armenia, you go to Gyumri, you visit Garine, you visit us in Yerevan, and we'd like to stay in touch with you all. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to thank you, and it will be my pleasure to meet you all whenever you need. You can reach me at my email, Maro shared. And also, I just wanted to say that I really firmly believe that after maybe 10 or 20 years, we will have these changes, big changes. So just yeah, we can hope.
And I want to say thank to Zarui, especially because she, on a daily basis, she's the one that is confronting those judges and the inspector officers, and she's the one that stands up to them to impose. And I just want to end up by real information that during one of her trials, the perpetrator was saying that he believes, he suspects that his wife has a lover, and that's why he beat her. And Zarui responded immediately. So in other words, if your wife suspects that you have a lover, then she's authorized also to beat you. So the judge, who did not understand at the beginning, then he realized the double standard. And he gave a more severe punishment to the abuser. So she has to deal with this on an almost daily basis, to fight for the rights of the victim, to convince the judge, to overcome the stereotypes and the biases. And this is a really very challenging and very draining effort on her part. So thank you, Zara, for all you do. And thank everybody, all the participants, and have a wonderful evening.
So I think that will conclude today's session. I want to thank our moderator and our panelists for their time today and for sharing with us their experience and insight on the very important issue of domestic violence in Armenia. A video of this webinar will be translated in Armenian, and it will be available on IWA's website in the coming days, and that's at iwainternational.org. AIWAinternational.org. We encourage you to visit our website and to join as members to connect and elevate Armenian women globally. Thank you for everyone's time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.